Let's see, this watch has a Sellita SW200 movement, comes on a bracelet, has a depth rating of 200 meters, and costs $500. Is that an appropriate price? I don't know. I've seen other watches like this, but can't remember the details. Can you remember the details of every watch in your collection or that you reviewed? Not only do I want to remember the watches in my collection, but I also want to know about all the watches I've seen through creating content for this channel. I'll show you how to record and use all this information in a concise and readily accessible method on this episode of Adventures with Time. I like to record information about all watches I've seen and purchased. Why? One reason is so that when I review a watch, either as an addition to my collection or to show you on this channel, I have some basis of comparison. Hi, I'm Bob, your guide on this channel, Adventures with Time. Through my videos, I chronicle my activities, learnings, and general thoughts as I enjoy the watch collecting hobby. I would love for you to subscribe and ring that bell icon so you can join us in exploring the world of watches. Yes, I do like to compare the specifications, prices, and other attributes across watches that I've seen. I think it helps me to determine if the price of a watch is reasonable. Now, I know some of you are going to say, "Hey Bob, you can't compare watches just based on their specs. There's so much more that goes into a watch." Yes, there are both intrinsic and extrinsic aspects that determine the value of a watch, and some may be specific to the buyer. However, as a first pass for me, it helps me to compare specifications of a watch to get an initial assessment of the price being asked. Then I can adjust that evaluation based on characteristics such as quality of finish, design aesthetics, and those personal emotions that we all have as individual collectors. So how do I maintain all this information and what data do I keep? Well, this is not going to be a technology tutorial. I do need to show you the tool I use to illustrate the strategy I follow. My strategy is multifaceted. Record information about each watch I've evaluated, whether or not I've owned it. Keep information on movements, independent, but link them to the watches that use them. There's no need to duplicate these specs for each watch. Record any watch accuracy measurements I've taken over time. I'll explain this later. One of the first things to understand is that I store this data in the cloud so that I have it even when I'm away from home. I can pull it up on my smartphone anytime, anywhere. I use a computer spreadsheet, specifically Excel from Microsoft, but there are many other tools to maintain table-like data. I just happen to use Excel extensively for my working career, and I'm very knowledgeable about it. My approach, that is this data layout, has changed over time as my experience and collecting activities have changed. Let's move over to the computer so I can show you what information I keep about each watch. Of course, there is the name of the watch, and if existing, I include the brand's model number or name of the watch. Then there is this column here on how this watch fits into my collection. A watch can be one that I currently own, a watch I've once owned but have since sold, or a watch that I've had in hand for review. Those watches that I have in my collection are further tagged as to how they are classified in my collection. I've discussed my collection classification in a previous episode. I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video. Watches are either a beater, an affordable watch, one of my best watches or better watches, or perhaps sentimental. And of course down here are those watches which have just been reviewed and I don't or have never owned them. I include any serial number that is given to the watch, the case, or the movement itself. Then there is a whole bunch of watch specifications. Note I include both the brand's movement number as well as the movement on which it's based. Sometimes brands will enhance, modify, or just rename other movements. We want to know what the original or base movement is, so that's why this column is here. And here are all the specs that I include about a watch. Anything from its dimensions to whether it came on a strap or a bracelet, its weight, the dial color, what kind of lume if I can tell, front and back treatment, whether crystal on the front is acrylic or sapphire, case material, information about the crown, and what kind of bezel it has. Then I include the purchase information, when I bought it, from who, what I paid for it, and then if I sold the watch, what the price I sold it for and the date. And then I have this last column that includes any supplemental information that I want. So you can see all my watches are here, including the ones that I've just reviewed. I also maintain information on all the additional hobby-related items I've purchased. These include books, watch tools, straps, storage boxes, etc. I also include watch repair and service costs. You may have noted that there are gaps in this data because I haven't filled everything in, or I may not know the details of that specification. One set of metrics that I used to keep is how often I would wear this watch in rotation and the average daily accuracy of this watch. This information is something that I wanted to track as a new collector. However, this is no longer something I feel I need to know. Just too much effort for the value that it provides me these days. So I've hidden that information. I also keep a separate set of information about each movement. I keep this separate since the specs are the same regardless of which watch the movement is put into. This way I can always look up the details about the base movement. So how do I use this information? Mostly I like to record all of this as part of my enjoyment of the hobby. It's just the way I'm wired. I also use it for comparison purposes. Let's say I'm considering or reviewing a new watch. I can look and see what other watches may have used this base movement of, let's say, a Sellita SW200. And you see there I've got two of them, and I can look at the price and see how this new watch equates to that. Or I could look at any of the other attributes or specifications of the watch. What lume it used, whether it had a sapphire or acrylic crystal. It just gives me a ballpark. I can see what other watches that I've evaluated might have the same cost drivers to see how they compare. Primarily, this might be used for watches that have the same movement, and then add on to that things like, do they have sapphire crystal or display back, just to give me a rough idea. As I've said before, making these types of comparisons doesn't provide a complete picture. Just because two watches use the same movement doesn't necessarily mean they should be priced similarly, but it does add insight to one's value proposition. At a minimum, it might prompt me to ask, why is this new watch priced double of the other watch which uses the same components? What do you think about my methodology? Do you do something similar? I enjoy this type of analysis. As I've said, I've done this throughout my career and now in my hobbies. Now here is that link to the video where I describe the classifications of my watch collection. And over here is another video where I talk about the complications of determining the price-value proposition of a watch. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.